Okay, so good evening. Marcia Trajano is an active participant in the Spiritist community in the United States. She has supported the efforts conducted by organizations such as U.S. Spiritist Federation, the Spiritist Conference of Georgia, Atlanta Spiritist Videos, and Atlanta Spiritist Radio. Ms. Trajano was the co-founder of the Christian Spiritist Community of Atlanta in 1997. For over 2 decades, she has been engaged in different areas, including child and youth education and educational department, delivering classes on inner transformation, fraternal counseling, mediumistic study, healing therapy, among others. An avid promoter of the dissemination of Spiritists in English, Ms. Trajano presents Spiritist lectures, provides simultaneous interpretation from Portuguese into English, and conducts Spirit study groups. Most recently, she has led virtual study groups focusing on the work of Joanna De Angelis. Professionally, Marcia is the Senior Solutions Project Manager at Philips Healthcare, where she's responsible for the onboarding of solutions in the North America market. So thank you so very much for being with us this evening, and we are all ears now.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. And let me share my screen. It would be just a simple slides for us to just have a sense. Can you confirm that you can see? Yes, awesome. Very good. So very, very happy when Viviane called me or sent me a message to present on this topic. And happy is a feeling, right? It's an emotion. So we're here today to talk about meaningful conversations about your emotional self. And as the bio said, I have embarked in this just wonderful journey of learning about myself through the facilitation study groups on inner transformation in 1998, so over 20 years ago. And it's very, I like to share this because it was only recently, we talk about maybe 2 years, 3 years, that I came to really understand the impact of emotions. In other words, how emotions play such a critical part in this journey, this voyage of learning about yourself. And when we do that, we're able to grow emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and spiritually. So I read Joanna De Angelis before. I love that you started the lecture today with the reading of A Happy Life. It's just such a good book about messages, right? About being happy and finding happiness within yourself. But I read Joanna De Angelis before, and I had never really truly met the truth of her teachings until the time, and it was very interesting. Somebody said, "Hey, we want to know more about Joanna De Angelis." This is a couple 3 years ago. And I said, "Okay, I don't know that I'm the right person to do that." And they said, "Oh, just bring any book." So I happened to have purchased Existential Conflicts in English. It had been recently translated. So I said, "Okay, let's start with this book." And I'll ask show of hand, who here has read that book, English or Portuguese? Okay, so it's good to know because I had neither. And so I said, okay, let's do this. Let's go ahead and learn together. So I'll read and we facilitate, and together we're going to dive into the teachings of that book. And since then, I finished teaching in English, and now I have started maybe 2, 3 months ago doing it in Portuguese. And every time you read or facilitate in one language or the other, you get more nuggets of knowledge from that book. I say to the folks that go to my class for the first time about this book specifically, is that every time you read, I it's almost as if she was slapping me in my face. True story. And it's just so many nuggets of knowledge on those discussions. I call the pearls of wisdom, right? And it really pushes all of us to understand our journey, to understand our learnings in a deeper sense. Since then, just to give a little bit of the story of me and Joanna De Angelis psychological series, I have facilitated the book Self Awareness to a group in English. And then I'm about to start the Psychology of Gratitude, which is the third book in her 17 book series that I am working with. So it is wonderful, right? And I'm just really excited to be here to give a little bit more of the information that is promoted in those books. Um, Joanna discusses the teachings of Kardec through a very specific psychological lens. Okay. She gives that layer because as we are presented with the Kardec and Spiritism, we understand that reality is no longer material. There is a spiritual reality to life. Joanna gives, and in my mind's eye, I say this is in the middle. Now we see the spiritual, the material, but also the psychological lens about our lives. And that's what she does. She gives this invitation for us to really uh, deep dive into ourselves, and in doing so, become quite courageous, right? And as a result, growing. Um, Wanted to say that Marlon Reikdal, and I don't know if you know him, he's considered one of the experts, the world experts of Joanna De Angelis and Allan Kardec, gave this beautiful book, and I'm forgetting to go to the next slide. So my apologies. So he wrote this book, which it's not in English yet. He wrote it in 2015, which is called Cultivating Your Emotions, right? And he gave this additional lenses through Kardec and Joanna De Angelis about our emotions. And I just wanted to share with you. I have it with me. Here it is, if you can see. It's a great book, and I'm reading for the second time and just love it completely. And it's uh, quite happy to be here to share a little bit of the content of the book. But before I do that, I just wanted to pause for a second and just remind us of who is Joanna De Angelis, right? So she is a spirit author, um, who's helping, who wrote the psychological series, but she also wrote many other books through the psychography of Divaldo Franco. And beyond that, as we know in her brief biography, she has incarnated over and over and over again as a collaborator to Jesus. So, just as a reminder, her last incarnation was actually in Salvador, Brazil, as Sister Joana Angélica de Jesus, and she lived a life for martyrdom during the Brazilian independence fight in the 18th century, right, early 18th century. Before that, it was very notable incarnation. Most people know her with this incarnation. She was Sister Juana Inés de la Cruz. She lived in Mexico, and she is considered the greatest poet in the Spanish language from that incarnation in about a century earlier, right? In the 17th century. Before that, we know that she also lived at the time of St. Francis of Assisi, now 13th century. And before that, we also know that she was, at the time of Jesus, Joanna de Cusa, as many know. So she was the wife of Cusa. And Cusa was a high-ranking official under Herod. So she, at the time, she became a follower of Jesus. And unfortunately, like those followers, she was burned alive with other Christians in the Colosseum. In terms of books, she and Divaldo worked together with over 60 books, and of those, about half have been translated from Portuguese into other languages, including Braille. And we're here now, right, to talk about emotions. And inspired by Marlon, I wanted to say that um, uh, these books that really go into depth of why emotions and why is it so important for us to confront those emotions of who we are, right? He in this book, Marlon talks about, simply put, what we need to do to be able to identify, to understand, and to deal with our emotions, and doing that in a very conscious way, but also in a very meaningful way. The premise of this book, and I look at the other screen, so my apologies. The premise of the book is that all of us humans, so you and me, our tendency is to either repress or control our emotions. Okay, and this is human. And this book specifically tell us we can't, we need to identify, we need to understand, but most importantly, we need to actually cultivate, meaning like the word that is easier in Portuguese than English, right? To cultivate, to grow, to, as a plant, to make it bloom in a garden. And I just stop here to ask, why do we need to focus on emotions? Why do we even have to cultivate? What's the reason for that? Right? And I answered the question because we enter the realm of emotional intelligence, which is um, the ability to recognize within us, the ability to name our emotions as well as the emotions of other people. And interesting enough, emotion intelligence specifically is a field that is so important today in our society. We're talking about the Western society that is now a part of curriculum in schools and businesses. No matter what, all that we're here about how important it is, most of us don't really know what our emotions are. We're not clear of what is even an emotion, right? And it is hard for most of us to talk about emotions. It is hard for us to, right? If we pause right now and we can just say, for all of us, we can quickly do this exercise of closing our eyes and just says, what do I feel? What is the emotion right now that I'm having? It's hard. So because it's so hard, I can say the first thing, emotions are an externally driven feeling. Okay. You don't just say, let's pretend. You don't just say today, we're right here and say, oh, I'm going to feel anger right now without an external stimulus to make us angry. And that emotion is a reaction to something that comes from the outside, whereas a feeling comes from inside of us. So it's important for us to understand then that and recognize that we are vulnerable and we react to things that happen around us, right? And some of the things that it's important for us to understand is, for example, um, can we maybe relate to being worried, right? Today is Monday, and maybe I was at work and I sent an email to my family about something that I'm going through, an emotional uh, charged email that is something that it's very difficult, and I'm just saying just generic. And right now I am worried because I don't know how my family is reacting to that email. Or maybe we can think about, let's say the excitement that we feel because there is an upcoming holiday and we have this fantastic plans post-COVID vaccination, and we're all excited, right? Or I don't know, talking about vaccine, the how the fear that all of us collectively in 2020 we felt when these virus, the unknown virus, came to be, right? The reality is that in our day to day, we don't pay much attention to all of this, that we emote, how we deal with external stimuli. But we know for sure that this is a quite important commodity for ourselves. So if we reflect for a moment, for example, in our material lives, our day-to-day, ordinary lives, nothing happens. And we have to realize that our emotions are actually constantly exploited by politicians in their election campaigns, for example, or even carefully manipulated by some sort of algorithm crafted by companies. And we can just name a few: Facebook, Amazon, Google, whatever. They look for our emotion and they play with that, right? And by playing to that, they push us to make this or that decision, purchasing or voting or whatever. So, again, in this book, the author reintroduces to us to this notion that all emotions in the human spectrum of emotions can be boiled into four basic emotions. And the four emotions that are highlighted in the book is they are the building block of our entire emotional lives. They are joy, sadness, fear, anger. They are very powerful drivers. And if we learn to direct them, we can push us forward in actually our moral evolution. So if we think of emotion like a simple reflex, again, it is an experience because there's something, an external predicament that is pushing us to reflect, to behave this way. And some of us, it's important for us to remember, are hardwired on purpose to have those basic emotions to protect us from harm. So let's say we are, I don't know, hiking, and out of the blue, unexpectedly, we come face to face with a bear. So what happens to us? Our eyes dilate, right? Our heart pumps really fast. We are frightened. We are afraid, and most of us may run. Wrong reaction, by the way. But some of us may run really, really fast from that bear. The problem with when we talk about this basic depiction of emotion is that it does not really capture what an emotion is, because if we were to provide a whole picture of emotion, we need to understand that on one hand, it is reactive, right? On the other, it is a physiological response. And it is not the only reason why we feel the way we feel at any given moment. There may be some hidden psychological reasons for us to react a certain way. So, as we think about what we're going to do in the next few minutes, where we start talking about meaningful conversation with our emotional self, I'd like to propose here for all of us that we may feel emotions more intensely just because we decided to bother to think about it, right? So think about it. Recent development, cognitive science shows that emotions indeed are not simple reflexes, but they are oh, immensely complex, elastic systems that respond alongside with our biology and what we inherit in our culture that we immersed in. So from a cognitive phenomena, they are shaped by our bodies and by our thoughts. So, what does it mean? It means that who we are, our concepts, our language, our philosophy, our religion, all change the way we feel about something. Does this make sense to everyone? Yes? No? Very
It
good.
does.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and hold on just a second. My apologies. So I'm back. So, as I mentioned, right, earlier, Joanna De Angelis um, is a spirit author. She gives us this psychological interpretation, a psychological perspective in the teachings of Allan Kardec. And because of it, specifically to me, it has given me an incredible, insightful way of looking to Spiritism through that lens. And if we go back to Kardec as the basis of it all, we start to remember that in Genesis, item 8 of chapter 18, um, in there, we are told that humanity has arrived at a period of transformation, and humanity must rise within the hierarchy of the worlds. You heard that before, right? So, where is this reference found? It's found in it's important, the last chapter of the Genesis, which was published in 1868, right? But at the same time, you see the same reference in the book Planetary Transition by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. And the idea both books bring to us is the fact that, yes, we are transitioning from a world of trials and expiations, but important, we are not going to transition like this in a step of a finger. And we're not going to transition also right now from where we are into becoming pure spirits, right? Not yet. But oh boy, we desire so much to move forward. We desire to focus everything that we have to in our inner transformation, right? And we want to be that pure spirit. We want to be better. At least I do, and I think all of you do as well. But we this desire and this focus may lead us to believe that we can become what we're not ready to be yet, because we are humans, human beings. We have emotions, And as such, the worst thing that we can do is, oh, now I am a spiritist. I am going to become a pure spirit. And I can only feel what I call in my senses to be good emotions, right? And to do that, what we do, we repress what we really are. And so with that, those books, all of them, caution us that yes, the journey from here all the way out there is long, and it's a journey of looking for your authentic self. And in that journey to be who you are, you need to embrace all the things that you still bring from your past, from your ancestral past. And as such, we need to understand that we have so many contradictions. We want to be good and we are not. We keep making the same mistakes, and we get angry, and we get afraid, and we get sad, and all of those emotions in between. Let's see if I can do this better. Sorry for my problem with my slide. Got it. So when we talk about the gospel according to Spiritism, interesting enough, um, we come to say that in this book, it also refers to the progression of the worlds. So now we talk about the Genesis, we talked about the planetary transition, and in the Gospel according to Spiritism, specifically chapter 3, item 4, where Kardec and our benefactor, spirits, that the spirits of light tell us there are 5 layers or types or progressions of the world that we live. And we begin in our primitive world. And in our beginning, in that beginning, we, as part of the human race, had our first lives, our first incarnations. In this world, it's lovely to know is that we had absolutely no discernment of what good and evil was. So, for the purpose of today, evil, and I say that because it's important for us when we talk about the battle between good and evil, it has this Star Wars quality, this very mythical, right? The good and evil. And it's not. What in the book, in the gospel, what he was talking about is the fact that evil is just the ability to inflict pain in ourselves and others. So that's when I talk about evil, right? That at that point we had no discernment that we were able to inflict pain in ourselves and others. And what the picture that comes to my mind is of a lion running in the savannas of Africa. The lion will not stop to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to inflict pain in this, this antelope." No, it is there to fulfill its instinctive pursuit to eat, to survive, right? And at that time, in the primitive world, we're going through the same thing. At that time, we when we see ourselves today defaulting to that earlier primitive self, we see ourselves, yeah, there are some instances when part of my reactions is raw. It's an emotional explosion, very akin to the beginning of my own journey, right? So a good example, stuck in traffic. Traffic is the best example of any of those to tell us, because we're stuck in traffic, and if anything happens, we feel that we've been attacked, right? And that moment, we exemplify our very worst behavior in traffic, and we've seen people killing other people. We've seen people cursing. We've seen people all sorts of behavior, and we're in traffic almost every day outside of this past year, and it's still, no matter how educated, polite, or zen you may be, it causes you to have a strong reaction. And the other thing is that we need to remember when we think about that world and how we sometimes go back to that is that we, at the time, we lacked control. And the lack of control was simply just related to our lack of knowledge and that moral discernment. We just lived, right? So we move on to the next world, a little bit more advanced. And that's where we are, the world of trials and expiations. And in this world, our awareness is a little bit developed, and we go from a total lack of knowledge to a place where we're just mostly evil, meaning we are mostly causing, inflicting pain to ourselves and others. We all suffer. And as explained before, right? We live lives where we all are in pain. Every single person that we know, we try so hard to not feel that, but we all have something. So in the book Existential Conflicts, Joanna explains that pain quite well, right? And she invites us to take courage to be able to face, to confront our inner conflicts. And the difficulty in confronting our inner conflict, our existential conflicts, it's because we no longer want to see them, right? We don't want to face them. And because we're in pain, we are very fragile. So the good news is that we're here in this indisputable and fatal law of progress, that we are here to progress, to grow. Therefore, we're given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to overcome the pains and to learn from it. And if we have courage and if we have discipline, um, we can actually grow quite fast, right? So instead of using escape mechanism that we become quite good at to run away from seeing our true selves, right? And those mechanisms of defense, according to the book Existential Conflicts, range from drug addiction to social media addiction to games, etc. Right? Anything in our world that removes us from looking inside and paying attention to outside. So we move from being, oh, I don't know, alcoholic, workaholic, shopaholic, obsessive compulsive, organizer. It doesn't matter. Those are all things that makes us not to pay attention at ourselves. And those existential conflicts that we all have can, oh, they can include selfishness, laziness, resentment, jealousy, anxiety, cruelty, violence, all types of stress and phobias. And they permeate who we are. They permeate our own attitudes, our behaviors, and quite frankly, we don't want to know who we are. We don't want to see our conflicts, and we become quite good at hiding them from ourselves. And this is where Joanna De Angelis' Jungian psychology in her series, right, talks a lot about our ability. We're masters at it, by the way, of creating masks to be able to, hide ourselves from us and from the world, and so that we can meet the expectations and demands of the world that our ego creates, right? So we believe that we are something that we're not because that's the culture that we immersed on. So we are so good at it, so good at it, that we end up believing in the masks that we create. And those are lies that are there as a mechanism, but we start believing that's who we are, that we truly are. And the more we believe in the lies that we created, our ego creates, the harder it is to actually look at ourselves and face ourselves. So, just to wrap up, I wanted to just remind us that the world of regeneration, the happy world, and the celestial worlds are the next five, I'm sorry, the next three of the five worlds. And in that journey from trials and expiation to regeneration to happy and celestial worlds, we are progressively able to get rid of our capacity to hurt ourselves and others. And this is really important, right? Because when we're hurting ourselves and others, we filter that. What am I doing? Right? There's a moral component of what we do. And I'd like to take the time to highlight here that we are transitioning, as we all know, to the world of regeneration. And it differs mainly from the world of trial and expiation because while we did not see before, we had no discernment, and the second one we felt, right, when we did things that are hurtful. In the world of regeneration, we actually can see, in addition to feel the impact of causing pains. So that evil, as I said before, is no longer seen everywhere, right? Because the world of trials and expiations, the notion of the mythical evil is everywhere. We see in the war, in corruption, we see in the amount of mental disorders everywhere, and misery everywhere we go, right? So in the world regeneration, uh, we start to see and avoid them because now we no longer think of us individually. We're keenly aware of not only the pain we suffer, but the pain that we cause others. Hence, we cannot keep on hurting our planet, our neighbors, our family members, etc. See? So, the proposal of having this idea of a meaningful uh, conversation with our emotional self is it's really a proposal for us all to understand our emotions as based in the spiritist teachings. So in the Genesis, as I mentioned before, Kardec poses the same question there when he urges to not only develop our intelligence, but also our feelings. So it is clear when you read the Genesis that we can really, and I love reading, right? So we can really develop and get excited about learning and growing and our intellectual pursuits. But Kardec already told us you need to also understand that investing in growing your emotional self is really, really important, right? So it is important again to understand that we study, we grow our ability to reason, to our ability to have mental discussions, right? And but that will not help you help touch or hear or feel or see yourself, your emotional self. So if we start to think of ourselves as someone with the propensity to always, first and foremost, to protect our ego, that our propensity is to mask who we truly are in our emotional reaction, we should instead start changing our mindset to look at our true selves and to actually live our emotions. So maybe we can think about it. What if we memorize books? Oh, the Bible, the gospel. Uh, Instead of memorizing, we live those teachings, we'll be a better person, right? So if we practice what we learn, if we translate what we understand into our behaviors and attitudes, that will impulse us to grow much faster. So, for example, we all have this emotional baggages and reactions, and we are feeling, I don't know, oh, vanity or jealousy or envy, for example, and I see myself, identify myself doing that. What do I do? Right? I thought I was better than that, and here I am right now feeling this. So, as I mentioned before, this conversation is just simply put an invitation for us to be brave, to learn about all those things that we inherit from ourselves, our own journey, right, to today. And those existential conflicts are, they seep through our day to day, through our emotions. And we could instead exercise, I don't know, a path that goes beyond our intellect to really embrace the realm of emotions. So if we are, let's say, here to have an emotional, a meaningful conversation about our emotional self, we have to understand, right? How do I deal with the four most basic emotions of our life? And they're there in the screen. Um, and they are so basic. They are, we feel those emotions every day, regardless of who we are. And that's very interesting, right? I can be a monk in the Himalayas, and I'm being very picturesque here, or I can be, I don't know, a priest, a businessman, I don't know, anyone, any type of profession, any type of nationality, any type of education, religion, gender, age. It doesn't matter. The reality is that we all, each one of us, live emotional lives that we prefer to ignore, and we actually don't know, because most of us don't know how to control them, right? So I want to ask in the to raise your hand if you have seen Pixar's movie Inside Out. Ah! If you have not seen it, please do, right? Because it is ingenious how in that movie, which is an incredibly adult movie to kids, and I love that, where it is inviting us to say every moment it's there's this the fight between all the different types of emotions in our lives, right? It's very whimsical, but it begs the question: have I even taken the time to look inside myself? So, just real quick, the founding member and the faculty director of the magazine called the Science Based Insights for a Meaningful Life. His name is Decker Keltner. He was a consultant for the movie. And the message is so fundamental. It's all about emotion, and they're very much consistent with all the latest scientific research. And it is beautiful because it really opens the door to conversations about this, no matter your age. So, happiness is not just about joy, the character, right? In the emotion. It is good to remember in the movie, in the film, the main character actually, even though there's all those fights, you cannot feel anger, you cannot feel fear, you cannot feel sadness. At some point, and it's a pivotal point of the movie, where the character actually starts to allow herself to feel sadness, right? And to feel fear and anger. It was about the idea of running away from home. But as a result, just as I give a little bit of the context, right? The character decides not to go through with her plan. And Riley's her name, right? Reunites her with the family, gives her, and by doing that, she gets in touch with a deeper sense of happiness and contentment and comfort, which she derives from her parents, right? So there is a term called diversity, which is an experience. Uh, uh, it's a name for an experience that is the negative and positive emotions. And if we do that, if we look in the sense that we actually fluctuate, we have better mental health. So no matter what religion you are, your age, etc., the more you mindfully embrace your emotions, even whatever they are, instead of suppressing them, we will be able to understand the emotions in our social community, even though in some cases we are frowned upon. So, for example, right, and this is something for us to think in terms of ourselves as a spiritist, right? Something happens and we feel angry, and there's many different levels of how to express that emotion, anger. Some of us have bursts of anger and they have no control over it, and they may become violent or actually so aggressive that may hurt somebody else, right? So when you live through that emotion that you cannot control, you tend to have mechanisms to repress, to suppress, because it's quite strong. Or in the other spectrum of strong, unbridled emotion is sadness, right? So you may become so sad, and if you don't know how to manage that sadness, it may lead to depression, right? So I don't know, maybe you saw a uh, I don't know, you're working with the suicide victims or hospice volunteer, or even having to deal with loss in your family, or even just looking at the 2020 with COVID, right? A year of such uh, tremendous loss everywhere. Or another emotion, fear, right? Fear is there, but if it's uncontrolled, it can lead to anxiety. And in fact, today in our society, Western society especially, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, all sorts of phobias, anxiety disorders, they really are everywhere. It's the true pandemic, I would say, if I may use that word, in our lives today, is the inability to deal with fear, right? And finally, joy. When we don't know how to manage even our lifelong pursuit of happiness, when we, instead of being happy, which is an internal feeling, we want an external response, which is joy. We may just keep sabotaging ourselves, because all we want is to overload our sensorial experiences with pleasure, right? And at the worst case, it may lead with issues with alcohol, sex, exhibitionism, and all, even power, right? When we become, I get pleasure from becoming a sense of power. Therefore, I can go on into my whole life to build on all the opportunities out there to keep seeking joy. So one mechanism that we need to do is to be able to recognize our emotions. We need to be able to learn to cognitively reappraise our situation. It just simply means to reinterpret what this means, to be able to shift our emotional response. And the other mechanism is, instead of avoiding or denying emotions, we should accept as an important part of our lives. So mindfully embracing an emotion, as Marlon Rakedale mentions in his book, is to just to uh, rather than getting caught up in the drama of an emotional reaction, a mindful person is able to be kind enough with himself, with herself, and observe the emotion without judging it. And when we don't judge it, we are able to create a space and stop or pause and understand, why am I, having this type of emotion? What is the root cause? Why? Why and how are this situation is bringing me such a strong reaction? And when we do that, which is the synopsis, right? When we are able to cut that, we're able to choose a healthy response. And by choosing, we're able to open a way to for self-discovery, a way to see who we truly are without masks. So just to allow time for us to talk, right? For a few, if you have questions, um, I just say, in all the problems our lives and our society, uh, most of them can be directly related to our emotional response. And we need to understand, if we repress them, this is what they call, we are a closed circuit, right? That if we repress an emotion, at some point it will go out. It will be burst out of that closed circuit. You cannot repress it, meaning there will be some sort of uh, physical or emotional response to those.